Welcome everyone back to another SkillSharp The Podcast. I'm Brian Wright, and I am happy to welcome a very talented guest and serial entrepreneur, Derek McKeith. Derek, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I've wanted to have this conversation and share some of the things that I have heard from you over the years. I really appreciate you being here to share some entrepreneurial wisdom. Now, in
Love it.
terms of your background,
hmm
uh, you're the founder of Bad Beans Coffee. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So Bad Beans Coffee was, or is, I should say, a company that was launched in 2020, but incepted in 2015. And it came from an idea that I had when I was actually a barista at a Starbucks while I was on my downtime from touring as a musician. And the concept behind Bad Beans Coffee is essentially merging the world of music and coffee, but also just a, the world of creatives, I should say, more so than anything, the world of creatives and coffee. Because to me, I've always felt like those worlds go hand in hand. You know what I mean? If you look at artists, actors, whatever, you're gonna usually see coffee in their hand or tea, coffee or tea, coffee or tea. And when I was on my downtime when I was working as a barista, what I started learning and picking up on was the fact that the coffee world, the coffee business, in a lot of ways, it's very similar to the music business, and it's also like another stage. And so while I was working back there, I just used to imagine myself, if I own a coffee company, if I own a coffee shop, what would I do different? You know what I mean? How would I operate my coffee company differently to make it better or different than a Starbucks per se? And so that was kind of the you know, seed for the creation of Bad Beans Coffee.
That's amazing. You know, you and I have talked about it. Coffee is one of the most universal habits,
Yeah,
addictions, and just beverages that, humans partake of worldwide, right? And everyone has a coffee ritual. They have a coffee routine. What's your coffee routine?
my coffee routine is ridiculous. So I don't even eat breakfast. I can't have food in my stomach without having coffee. And I know that's bad, but I'll wake up in the morning, drink a cup of water, drink a cup of coffee. And I drink coffee black until I get down to like my last cup of coffee. And then I'll have a little bit of a cream and maybe a little bit of agave or something like that in it. But I usually drink my coffee through a French press. I don't use like coffee machines. If I want an espresso, I will use my espresso machine. I don't want to say I'm a coffee snob though, but I like good coffee and I like my coffee prepared well, and I know how to do that. So I make sure that I treat myself well, and those who are around me, I treat them well with that. So
I don't want to get diverted. I should be more disciplined in this, but so what do you do with your coffee grounds with the French press?
okay, you know what's funny that you even said that? I actually saved mine, and so coffee grounds can be used in a lot of different ways. I don't think a lot of people know, but I use them for that. So you can use them for your soil. It's fantastic for soil. I don't know if you've ever been to a coffee shop and seen like people who work outside who are really into horticulture, they'll stop at coffee shops and ask for the coffee ground because it helps replenish the soil. Um, it can also be used for skincare. A lot of people don't know that it's a
Uh,
good exfoliant. Yeah, you can use coffee grounds after you use them, and if you add a little bit of coconut oil to it, you can use it as an exfoliant. So, I mean, there's a lot of uses for coffee grounds, you know. For the most part, if I'm not using it for the soil or anything like that outside, I just dump them. I'm not going to pretend like I don't, but there are other uses for coffee grounds.
No, I'm a French press person
A
myself, so
grinder.
I've been essentially jugs and jugs because I don't want to put it down the sink or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've oversaturated the yard, so it's not about that necessarily. But yeah, no, it was just an interesting question I've always wanted to pose. So question. So in
Sure.
terms of your ritual, your habit, um, you know, I think you've told me about developing a palate.
Yeah.
So how did that evolve over time? Because hey, some of us are used to the hotel room coffee, and when we
Mm-hmm.
don't have it, that's just fine, and others will not drink anything but a Starbucks,
Mm.
venti, one
Right.
they love. So I mean, how did you develop your coffee palate?
It initially started from espresso shots, actually.
Hmm.
So every one of our favorite sweet coffee drinks, like cappuccinos, lattes, or anything that would put a lot of cream and sugars into, um, even like, excuse me, blended drinks. They'll use like a strong concentrate espresso base, almost like. And I always knew that if I'm able to take an espresso shot, I should be able to drink black coffee, because usually espresso shots are a lot more intense. They're a lot more bitter and acidic, and they bite differently. You know what I mean? They're not friendly to the palate. But what you get from it, like the kick, the charge from an espresso shot, it's like it hits your bloodstream almost like intravenously. It's like crazy how fast that'll actually hit and kick you up. And so, almost like alcohol, I don't think people really drink alcohol and say, hey, man, I love the way this tastes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people are drinking gin or vodka and saying, I love the way this tastes. I think they like the effects. I think when it's mixed into things, it's easier, it's more palatable to drink. And so, the same way though you're able to psych yourself out into drinking a shot, right? Shot of whiskey or a shot of whatever. If you take that same mindset and say, hey, I can drink a shot of espresso, that'll be one way to start getting yourself going. Then you start to realize, hey, I can also put a little bit more water in this and dilute it a little bit more. It doesn't have to stay just like this before I start putting in the creams and the sugar. You know what I mean? If you're trying to be serious about developing your palate, because once you develop it, you're usually good to go. It's just there. And the real goal, the real key is to just force yourself not to add the creams and the sugars, because that really takes away from all the flavor profiles that a coffee has to offer you. And so it is a process. I like to say, I don't know too many people who just off right just start snapping back black coffee. I mean, it's abrasive. You know, it's not the most tastiest thing you can have. You know what I mean? That's the reason why people have coffee with their cream and sugar versus having cream and sugar with their coffee, so to speak. Oh wait, did I say that right? I think I said that right.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, no,
you kind of get the gist.
yeah, no, no, no,
But
absolutely. So let me ask you this. So from the standpoint of knowing you're drinking Starbucks quality coffee, okay, or Bad Beans quality coffee versus Folgers is too low, but donut shop coffee.
you're going to be able to taste that
What is
difference
that?
immediately.
What is that though?
What is what?
Is it
Specific.
is it a richness? Is it depth of flavor? Is it
Yeah, it's definitely that. So good coffees are usually grown at higher elevations, and coffees that are used in major chains like a Starbucks, they're not going for those types of coffees only because those take a lot longer to process, and there's a higher price point on those types of coffees. So when people are buying bulk, like for Starbucks, what they're doing is usually buying lower elevation, grown at coffee beans grown at lower elevation, probably usually from like Indonesia or something like that. And it doesn't have the same flavor. The higher the elevation, the more flavor characteristics will start to arise out of the coffee bean. The lower, it's kind of like, it's almost kind of like if you were to climb a mountain, how would you feel once you hit the top versus starting at the bottom? When you start at the bottom, you're like, yeah, all right, whatever, no big deal, right? But if you were to make it to the top of the mountain, you feel like you've accomplished something. Everything seems a little bit better because you've made it up there. Your view seems to look clearer. You know what I mean? The air might be a little bit cleaner, whatever. All of that goes actually in to the actual flavor of a coffee bean. The higher the elevation, you might have a little bit more moisture. You might have a little bit more minerals in the soil because they're not being stomped on all the time. They're not being trapped on all the time. You know what I mean? There's all these little nuances that help the flavor actually of a coffee bean. So the lower the altitude, it's not going to have that same, you know, it's almost kind of, I should say, it's going to be kind of like growing weeds at the bottom of the hill versus growing tall grass.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah.
that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the weeds are at the bottom, you already know that because they're getting beat up the most. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They're getting handled the most. They're getting recycled the most. And that's what happens with those coffee trees that are growing at lower elevation because they're constantly in cycled and rotation. They're not grown for top quality flavor. They're just grown for mass production
Right.
because they can grow faster.
What's the lure of, I mean, I don't know, the coffee bean that is eaten by one of the animals and then
And
it's
then pooped
better
out.
once it is excreted.
Yeah. No, I forgot the name of that one off the head too. But
No, don't worry, don't worry.
yeah, no. It's actually there's a few cultures that actually do that. So it's not just so it's from horse dung, I believe. Like
Oh
there's
wow.
one, there's another one. Um, what was the one you're talking about? Was it eaten by monkeys or something like that? And it's
Yeah, I
pooped
think
out.
it's somewhere in
It's in Africa, I know
eh,
that.
oh no, is it? I thought it was in Colombia or somewhere close to the Amazon, but I'm not sure.
See, and that's what I'm saying. Like I've heard of them in different countries. So I could be wrong, you could be right, and vice versa. We could both be wrong, we could both be right at the same time. So I've
Well,
heard it from
I'm
different
usually
cultures. I've
I'm
heard
usually
different
be right.
animals.
So no, I'm teasing.
No, no, no. I've heard different animals.
I'm going from my name. I'm making a joke. Don't worry.
No, no, no. You're totally fine. I've heard different animals that eat the coffee cherries and then poop them out in different cultures. Like they do that also in Asia, where literally like you have people who are literally like hands out waiting to catch the dung from an animal to start sifting through the cherries or not to get it. It's
Oh,
crazy.
now.
So I've seen it in multiple countries from different types of animals. So it depends. But that's an expensive coffee. I think it going through, I don't know what the real allure to that really is. I think just the process of it going through the intestinal tract seems to alter, I guess, the the bean, or I should say seed, because coffee beans are actually not beans, they're actually seeds.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that. Coffee beans, they're not beans, they're seeds. You know, they come green and after the beans are green after they've been cleaned, picked from the cherry and everything whatnot, and then they get shipped off so they can be roasted whatnot. But they're actually seeds within coffee cherries.
Do
You know
people
what I
eat the
mean?
cherries?
I'm sorry.
Do people eat the cherries?
Some people do. Some
Okay.
people do. As a matter of fact, the discovery of coffee, so coffee originated in Ethiopia. And the discovery of coffee actually came from a goat herder who was looking at his goats eating on these cherries. And then what you realize and recognize shortly thereafter is the amount of energy that they all started to, to show. They started like
Mm.
bouncing around, running faster, moving faster. So he was like, man, what is this? And so he kind of looked into it. And then that's kind of like the beginning of the story of coffee, you know what I mean? Where he was like, oh, this actually has a an uppers effect, you know what I mean? And the goats are a lot more active when they eat this. I wonder if this will have the same effect with human beings, you know what I mean? And so the discovery
Well, it's very interesting.
was there it did. So.
You had brought up something about Starbucks purchasing in mass, and it's usually from lower elevations, and then obviously you have higher elevation coffee. Question, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they use, and I'm not saying just Starbucks, but the term blend, I think, is used very strategically.
Mm-hmm.
So could it be that, they are using the term blend or the process of using a finer and higher quality bean, but mixing it with a mass level, lower quality bean, but then
So
benefiting from the term blend?
right. So like you said, the term blend, it's funny. People think when you think blend, a lot of times people think it's a split, 50-50 of something, you know what I mean? But the way larger companies use blend is, for example, like Kona. Kona is a very expensive coffee, comes from Hawaii, right? It's usually where I can buy usually green coffee beans from anywhere between $4 to $6 a pound, where I used to be able to do that
That's
before the
that's
tariff.
wholesale, right?
That's right, and that's green beans before the tariffs. Right now, the tariffs is kind of throwing a huge monkey wrench in it. So now we've gone from 4 to 6 to now we're at 4 to 9, 4 to 10. You know what I mean? So it's been actually ridiculous right now. But Kona coffee usually sells between like $40 a pound green, right? Before it's even roasted. So then you're thinking about, okay, so now once it gets roasted, you can charge upwards between 50 and above, right? When you go to a supermarket and they're offering Kona coffees, if you really look at the coffee, what you'll see is it says 10% Kona. The rest of it is blended with something else. And so they're able to get away with calling it Kona because they've thrown in at least 10% in there to blend. So they can call it Kona coffee. But the fact of the matter is, Kona coffee, a pound, is super expensive. It's one of the more expensive coffees there are to get. True Konas. Like I sold Kona once in my first year, and I think I only lasted with it for like 2-3 months before I was like, okay, this has got to stop.
Not
I got to
cost
pull this one.
effective.
I
Yeah, no, I
couldn't
listen,
sell it.
the same way that they do with wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blends are not the top interest of wine connoisseurs, right?
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, that was just the interesting part. Because I think again, it's such a common commodity. It's such a common product that everyone consumes.
Mm-hmm.
There's these varying levels of knowledge of what we're actually consuming, or
Right. Right.
what you're paying a premium for, or why do you choose to go to a specific coffee. You have your coffee spot,
Mm-hmm.
or similar to your customers, wow, I have a trusted, coffee manufacturer that I can go to get it delivered to me fresh.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing this stuff. I know exactly what's in. He has multiple product lines that I can choose from teas to, matcha to, obviously various flavors of coffee, and then even a rub that I am a huge advocate for. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people choose it for many different reasons, but again, their
Mm-hmm.
level of knowledge of it and what they're actually getting is something different. What would you, what would you want to not so much teach people, but in terms of just giving them a little bit of knowledge. So if they did have an interest in developing a palate, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like what should they know about coffee that is not readily shared nowadays?
That's a very nuanced question because I think a lot of people think they know about coffee because they drink it. And that's funny. You know what I mean? Because a lot of adults drink wine and alcohols, but like if you talk to a sommelier or something like that about a wine or an alcohol, you're gonna find out how little that you actually really do know
Right.
about what it is that you're taking in. For me, I would love for people just to have a desire to actually want to know more about what it is that they're drinking when they're drinking coffee, and desire to have a true coffee experience and not just the touch and go fast, drive through type of experience where they're not getting told anything about what they're drinking. They don't even know what they're drinking. And it's just kind of like, even when people go, to coffee shops and they ask for an espresso, okay, where did those beans come from?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because technically any bean can be an espresso. So what kind of bean are they using for the espresso? Things like this. People don't even think about that. You know what I mean? Like I was actually shooting content yesterday and I was explaining, I think people sometimes, video is actually about dark roast coffee because I think a lot of times people see dark roast coffee as stronger, more caffeine. It's got to look a certain color, you know what I mean? And all that's not true. You know what I mean? Like there are some beans that are so light and colored in their green state that when you roast them dark, they might look like a medium still. You know what I mean? There are some beans that are actually already dark where you can roast them even in their light stage and they'll look like they're a dark roast because the bean itself is a dark bean. You know what I mean? So that's one aspect of it. That's something I was talking about in the video. Also, the caffeine content. Like I used to have customers come in all the time and say, "Hey, man, I need that real caffeine kick, man. Give me that dark roast. Give me that dark roast." And I would just look at them with the same look, like, "Hmm. So are we talking about flavor or you want caffeine? Because if you're talking about caffeine, you want to go lighter. The lighter the roast, the more caffeine. The darker the roast, the less caffeine. The more flavor, but the less caffeine. Because it's happening, what's happening is it's similar like when you have vegetables, right? If you have green vegetables, raw vegetables or raw fruit, it's the most potent in that state, right? When you start cooking it or even cutting it down and mixing it, with other stuff or putting stuff on it, you're taking away from the nutritional value and the contents of it, right? So if you have vegetables and you start cooking down the vegetables, they have something that's called pot liquor, where they say that's where all the nutrients are actually still in that pot liquor. So don't throw away the pot liquor. That's same that's happening when you roast. You're roasting out that caffeine. You're roasting out that water content that's in the bean that actually holds that caffeine in there. So that gets roasted out. You know what I mean? So it's not
That's
stronger in caffeine.
wild.
Yeah, it's not stronger in caffeine. It's stronger in flavor. It still has caffeine, don't get me wrong, but it's not stronger in caffeine. If you drink a cup of light roast coffee and then drink a cup of dark roast right after that, give yourself a half-hour window in between, you're going to notice a clear difference. Like when you go to Latin American countries, you'll never see them drinking dark roast. It's not going to happen. Why? Because usually in those coffee producing countries, which are usually Latin America and whatnot, they need to move. They're in there hustling. You know what I'm saying? They want something that's actually a stimulant, not something that's gonna bring them down. They want the stimulant. So you'll see them, what I mean, drinking that light roast coffee because it's got the most caffeine. You'll see them even nibbling on coffee cherry sometimes, you know what I mean? Because it's got the most potency. Not even to take it there because it's not about that, but even like, so we look at the drug cocaine in its most derogatory sense because it's powdered, it's this and this and this, right? But if you go to those Latin American countries, they'll pick coca leaves off a plant and chew them, and it's a normal thing because it keeps them going all day long. It's like them literally like it's like their cup of coffee, just taking a coca plant leaf and just chewing. It's like in its most pure state, but it's not. drug. You see what I'm saying? It's not mixed chemically and doing it. It's natural, pure state. And so what you always want to do is have its when you're consuming a plant, when you're consuming a fruit, a vegetable, you always want it in its most purest state. And if you can't have it in its most purest state to get the best benefit and the value, then you want it the next step up. You don't want to just shoot to the top and be like, yeah, I want it like this, and then find out that it's just mush. It's nothing. You know what I mean? So you want to get it in its most potent state, and that's lighter roast. That's
Wow.
why the medium is always the best roast for people who don't really drink coffee. Medium roast is always the best because it's the best of both worlds.
Mm.
You're getting that flavor that you want from the dark side, the dark side,
The dark side.
the dark side. Anyway, sorry. You're getting the flavor from the dark side, but then you get the light, you get the flavor profile still from the light as it's kind of dissipating. So you'll still get some of those fruity nuances and the nutty profiles.
No, man,
Oh,
and listen, you're dropping knowledge. I've never heard that in like a lifelong coffee drinker. You know what I mean? My
mm.
grandfather had me drinking coffee when I was like, 6, hanging out at his plumbing shop. So,
I started
well,
with coffee ice cream, so I get it.
and
Haagen-Dazs coffee
no,
ice cream.
love coffee ice cream. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Um, you mentioned something about your content, and I also, kind of touted you have exceptional messaging on Bad Beans. Like, one, it's fun. I think, especially for social, you you hit on certain things. It's engaging. Obviously, you do great about introducing new products. How have you blended your creative talents to be able to support your marketing and messaging for your brand?
Good question. It's funny because a lot of people know me as a musician, so music kind of comes second nature. But what they didn't realize was in tandem, I was also a TV producer. I was producing TV. So my mom, before she became a TV exec, she was a well-known, actress, whatnot. So I used to be on sets with her. So I was always, and also I was a child actor. So I used to always see how sets were running, how things were done, how things were achieved. And in my mind, again, I'm not a person who sits around idle and just accepts what I'm seeing. I always try to figure out how can I do this for myself if I wanted to take that step to do that. You know what I'm saying? And what would I have to either eliminate or what would I have to include? And when you're by yourself and you're working by yourself, you tend to become even more creative. So what I started doing is for years as a TV producer, I sit in there with an editor. You know what I mean? When it's time to get my segment edited, I have to sit in there, watch what they're doing, whatnot, and make sure that pieces are kept in. So inadvertently, I'm learning how to edit as well. Editing is about timing, you know what I mean, and counts. Well, I'm a musician, so in my head, I'm constantly editing. I'm on clicks. I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm always on timing. Editing, when I used to watch my mom when she was starting to slowly get into editing, I used to watch what she would do. She would look at commercials and she would count before they would cut to the next shot. Right? She would sit there, 1, 2, 3, count. All these things has been a lifetime of just realizing that I've been obtaining tons of skills and not really leaning on tons of skills that I've had, known that I had, but just didn't lean on because they weren't really within the things that I was trying to do. You know what I mean? I was always just seeing them as just things that I was just doing, things that I was just doing. And when you become an entrepreneur, one of the first things you're going to find is that costs will make or break your business. You know what I mean? And you're going to start asking yourself, well, how can I eliminate costs? You know what I mean? What do I absolutely need? What don't I need? Do I absolutely need this? Do I absolutely need that? can I do this myself? Do I need to pay for somebody else to do this? And so for me, I learned how to edit. I learned how to shoot. I learned how to film. I learned lighting. I'm already a musician, so I don't need anybody to do music for me. You know what I mean? I play 5 instruments. I can do that myself. And so I started sitting back saying, you know what? The key to a successful business is marketing and branding. If I can monopolize as much of this as possible, I'll save myself a whole lot of money. I know a lot of companies spend the majority of their budgets on marketing and promotion, marketing and promotion, marketing and promotion. They hire actors. They hire, you know what I mean, production companies to film spots. They hire editors. They do all this stuff. Well, I can do all this stuff. And you start realizing that you are your best employee as well. So I would sit there and say, I need ads for, you know what I mean, a product. I would just start doing ads myself for these products, not really looking at it like, you know, it's work. It's just something that just really needs to get done. You know what I mean? And then I would conceptualize commercial ideas or just random ideas. All these things started just kind of falling in line. It was just funny to me because, again, I've been going through life as a creative, not really dialing in on how much I've actually really learned over all these years. And to be able to put all this stuff into what it is that I do, to be able to shoot ads, to be able to make music for those ads, you know what I'm saying, to be able to have t-shirt pressing, you know, machines, to be able to do all that myself, you know what I mean? I pressed up this sweatshirt myself, you know what I mean? I didn't have to go out and have it pressed up. I'm very in-house. And a lot of that comes from my work in the entertainment industry and having to be very self-sufficient, you know what I mean? And so I don't know if I've answered that question or if I feel like I kind of like went off on one of those tangents that I sometimes tend to do, but
Well, I mean, I think the hook is, and it's interesting. Your answer kind of fits with your skill set that you described. It's very broad. So
mm-hmm,
where you have all these different skills, when you have a need, you're able to apply certain skills. It's almost like the wax on, wax off mentality, where
mm-hmm,
technically Mr. Miyagi has been teaching you how to do these things your whole life, but you didn't realize it until you actually needed to put it into use. So
exactly.
that's, I
Thank you
mean,
for articulating it like that for me, because exactly what you said, it's exactly that. Tools in your toolbox that you don't know when you use them, but you're able to use them when you see that, hey, that's a screw that I have the screwdriver for that screw. Even though it's an odd one, I have that one. So I feel that, yes.
yeah, and what's also interesting is most people are not cognizant of their strengths or their skills until someone else points it out, which is very interesting. It's also like usurping your power, right? You're giving your power
Mm-hmm.
away. But coming back to what you do, I mean, I think being able to tell a great story, being able to engage an audience, you're also able to educate them. So that key message that we were talking about earlier, like why is coffee important? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's your ritual? What's your day-to-day routine with it? How they should be thinking about building a palate, what makes a good cup of coffee or not. Those
Mm-hmm.
things, if they're never messaged that, if they're never asked that, like you had said, we all go through life being coffee drinkers, but not knowledgeable of coffee whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So your messaging definitely has a mission. And I think that's why we're happy to have you here on Skillsharp. What are some closing thoughts? I mean, what's new for your business? You had mentioned managing through tariffs and other things, but what do we have to look forward to in terms of bad beans and how can people get involved?
Scaling and growing, to be honest with you, the best way right now is tell people to get involved is socially. You know what I mean? Like as many, it's funny because I have followers, but to get people to engage is different. You know what I mean? It's people will follow you, I realize with social media, but they won't always engage. So for me, I just like the engagement. You know, feel free to ask questions and talk because I'm always, unlike a lot of business owners, I actually make myself available to my customers and to my clientele. I don't want them to feel like they can't, you know, I don't want to say get to me, but they can't have a rapport with me on some level. You know, I don't want to be some type of untouchable when everything I do, either entertainment wise or even coffee wise, is to literally create some type of community, some type of, congregation, so to speak. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think the engagement is a struggle for all of us. I mean, I
mhm.
think from every platform, from every brick and mortar, like just our lives in general, the attention economy is really crazy. But listen, you are doing it. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you. Any closing thoughts for the people?
Drink up, drink black coffee. One, it can save your life. Drink black coffee. Take out the creams and the sugars. If you absolutely have to have 1 cup of cream and sugar coffee. Other than that, drink black coffee. If you're a guy, it can help prevent heart attack, stroke in us. It also helps in men and women. It helps to regulate our circadian rhythms. It can also help you with your weight loss.
Mm.
There's a lot of benefits to coffee if you're diabetic and actually help prevent diabetes. There's a lot of things, but you have to drink it black. You can't put the cream and the sugar. Once you do that, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? But there's super benefits to drinking black coffee. So that's my campaign right now. Drink black coffee.
And add it to your food too, because the rub is no
Yeah.
joke. So what's your main website and social handle?
Bad Beans Coffee. BAD Beans BEANS coffee.com at bad beans on Instagram, at bad beans team on Facebook, at bad beans everywhere else. So
Oh man. Well,
yeah,
listen, brother, I appreciate you, and
thank
we
you for
will
having me.
let's call this a part one because definitely love to have you back and discuss what's new.
I love it.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me.
Yes, sir.